A lot of people in my comment section have been saying that Wuthering Waves is turning into Honkai Star Rail. And what do they mean with this? Well, what I think they mean is that they are getting the same amount of power creep, as well as characters requiring 5-star characters in Wuthering Waves as of recent, as Honkai Star Rail, which is famous for being incredibly unhealthy in terms of meta. But how true is this? That's what I intend to dive into in this video. There's a couple of factors that turn Honkai Star Rail into the mess that it currently is. There are 3 main factors that I think are the reasons for this. Number 1, the lack of 4-star characters and characters essentially requiring 5-star supports. Number 2, characters being reliant on their signature weapons, or in Star Rail's case, light cones. And then finally, number 3, the absurd amount of HP inflation of endgame content. So I'm going to go past each and see how Honkai Star Rail compares to Wuthering Waves. First of all, the lack of 4-star options for characters. This is one of the biggest issues with Star Rail, because whenever you pull for any DPS, you're not just done when you pull that DPS. You need to get their full team. But is WuWa the same in this regard? I heavily disagree with this notion. While the most recent character, Zani, does have a big difference between her best-in-slot 5-star support compared to her best-in-slot 4-star support, we have to remember that up until this point, Wuthering Waves has been doing incredibly well when it comes to providing 4-star alternatives to 5-star teammates. And let's be honest here, Zani is more of an exception than she is the rule. And while Zani might be the most recent character, we have to see how Kuro Games goes into the future when we're talking about this topic. But as of now, I think almost every single 5-star DPS has a very good 4-star alternative. So let's look back. First, we have Zani, who obviously very much wants to have a Phoebe on her team. But even without Phoebe, you are able to make do. People have been using Spectra Rover with Shorekeeper in their team as well and have been clearing tower this way. There's also Mortefi in Spectra Rover if you want to go for a full 4-star team. So clearly, it's not exactly like Zani is required to run with a 5-star character. Then we go over to Phoebe, who ran in 2.1. Her team is basically filled with free-to-play friendly units, and I believe she is the most free-to-play friendly character in the entire game. There's also Carlotta, who while she does gain a lot from Zheja, can still run just fine with Taocha and Sanhua, as well as Yang Yang. All 3 of them are good options for Carlotta. Then there's also Camellia, who has very obvious synergy with Sanhua as well. Then we get to another character that seems dead set on using 5-star characters, being Sheng Liao. But even then, with either Yang Yang or Sanhua, you're still able to clear with him very well. And some of my friends have even told me that their Sheng Liao clears faster with Sanhua compared to Yinlin, because you just have faster rotations and get to use his nuke more. Jinshi is also perfectly capable of using Yuanwu and Mortefi as her teammates, and even if you can't use those, Verena is very good at generating stacks, allowing you to use characters that don't even use coordinating attacks. There's also Jian, who in his best-in-slot team runs a 4-star support. So when we compare WuWa's 4-star options compared to those of Star Rail, WuWa definitely wins. And while they haven't been releasing a lot of 4-stars, I think the base cast was strong enough and gave enough utility to where it's not required. Obviously, this can change a lot in the future, but we're not in the future. I'm judging the game as it is right now. Second of all, there is the reliance on signature weapons, and this is where I start to agree with people a lot more. You see, ever since the launch of Wuthering Waves, one thing has been incredibly obvious about weapons. 4-star weapons are not good. 4-star weapons are discouraged. So most people end up pulling for signature weapons because the 4-star options are just simply not strong enough. This has been an issue since the beginning of the game. GN loses a pretty large amount of damage by swapping to Lustrous Razor. Jinshi loses even more damage from swapping to her signature to Lustrous Razor. And then we have the egregious examples like Brant and Sheng Liao, who lose a ridiculous amount of damage purely because you did not pull for their signature weapon, which is honestly quite a shame. At the beginning of the game, this was because the game was young. We didn't have the 5-star alternatives that we do now, but Kuro's response to this has just been to make newer weapons either more specialized for specific characters, or to just make them more powerful and give more stats. I would even argue that the situation in Wuthering Waves could be perceived as even worse as in Honkai Star Rail. In Star Rail, characters like Anaxagoras are completely fine on 4-star event Lycones. For Harmony characters, we have incredibly strong options like Dance Dance Dance, which honestly makes zero cycling runs infinitely easier than they would be without it. In WuWa, we just have the saving grace of Static Mist and Emerald of Genesis, which, let's be honest, people have multiple copies of these weapons purely because the 4-star options just cannot be relied on. So when we talk about 4-star weapons in WuWa against 4-star Lycones in Honkai Star Rail, I think Honkai Star Rail has a way healthier balance of 4-star Lycones. This is obviously to a certain degree. For example, with Casters, when you start comparing her signature Lycone to the best free-to-play Remembrance option, you're looking at a 20% damage drop, which is comparable to Brant with his signature weapon and Red Spring. So obviously it's not like Star Rail is perfect in this scenario either. But the fact that I can compare these games so easily should tell you enough about how bad the 4-star weapon situation really is in Wuthering Waves at the current moment. There are lights in the darkness, however. For example, Stringmaster has consistently been within 5% of the signature weapons for almost all damaging Rectifier characters, the only real exception to this being Cantarella. So obviously, if you pull for the correct 5 stars, you'll still be completely fine. But that does not excuse just how bad the 4-star options are within Wuthering Waves. And then for the final point, it is HP inflation. This is the point that I think matters by far the most, because if the HP inflation in your game is manageable, it means that no matter how bad your 4-star Lycones or your 4-star teammates are, you'll probably still be able to clear with almost any DPS in the game, as long as you put in enough elbow grease and investment. Hell, DPS Alto is able to clear at this point in the game if you invest into him enough, which is why I believe that HP inflation is the biggest contributor to Honkai Star Rail's downfall. So let's see how Wuthering Waves has been handling HP inflation. Well, let's just say really well. When I say that this game's HP has not even increased by 15% over the course of an entire year, I mean it. Now, there has been a pretty big change in the Tower of Adversity, which I have to address, being the fact that the middle tower has changed from giving a 30% universal damage buff into reducing the resistance by 10% of 2 elements and increasing it by 10% for 2 elements. This means that your team building is more restrictive than it was before, which did overall make the game harder. But the point is that HP has stayed relatively similar. Whereas in Honkai Star Rail, the difference between the initial release and the Memory of Chaos of 2.1 is 127%. I am not joshing you. Using the most generous numbers I could find in Honkai Star Rail's favor on HomDGCat, I found that the initial HP for Memory of Chaos was 1,660,000. Meanwhile, in 2.1, which is the anniversary patch for Honkai Star Rail, it was 3,780,000. Yep, it more than doubled. So honestly, if I had to look at Wuthering Waves with its less than 15% HP inflation and compare it to Honkai Star Rail's 127%, I will take WuWa any day. I don't care that some elements are going to be more restricted than others now. This is way better than Star Rail, and anyone who disagrees with that notion honestly just needs to think about the numbers more. If we look at the second year of Honkai Star Rail, we do see some improvement, with HP staying mostly around the 3,000,000.7 mark, but then ever since 3.0 it has shot up into the minimum of 6 million, giving us an increase of 96.4% when you compare the 2.1 Memory of Chaos to the 3.2 Memory of Chaos. So, let's be honest here. HP inflation is what ruins Star Rail. It's not about the character not having enough 4-star alternatives or not having good 4-star weapons. It's about the content simply not allowing you to use copium options. We can still see people clearing with Emerald of Genesis Brant. We can still see people clearing with Zani and Rover, and while they are big decreases compared to the premium options, they are way better than trying to use Acheron with Good Night Sleep Well in the current meta. So ultimately, as long as the content stays at its current difficulty, it doesn't matter as much if a character doesn't have good free-to-play alternatives. And while it is bad that characters are becoming more and more premium, it won't turn the game into Honkai Star Rail. And anyone who says that the game is turning into Honkai Star Rail is looking at a home robbery and thinks that a diamond vault is being raided. But that's just my perspective. What do you guys think of this comparison? Let me know in the comments below. And while you're down there, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions, be sure to ask me in my Discord, which is linked in the description. I'm pretty active in there, so if you ask me a question there, there's a pretty good chance I'll answer it. But that'll be all from me. Peace.